So we have another panel now, which relates, in fact, a lot to a question that was asked earlier, and that's around behavior change and sustainability. And I'm very pleased that Diana Rancourt is joining us and leading the panel. Gives me a break, thank you. Diana is a real expert in nutrition and food addiction and how food can affect us. And I think she's perfect in terms of talking really to a group of clinicians, a group of people who are dealing with patients all day long, helping patients who see some patients succeed more easily and others less easily. So I look forward to this. Thank you very much, Diana.
Absolutely.
Yes. I think it's
No, just slides. Okay, we're good. Okay. All right. Hi, everybody. I'm Diana Rancourt. I'm an associate professor at the University of South Florida in the U.S. I am a licensed clinical psychologist, and while I don't currently see my own patients, I do supervise students who see patients. And I have expertise in eating disorders and obesity. So I'm particularly interested in the disordered eating behaviors or the eating behaviors regardless of weight status. And so I think that brings a unique perspective because people are typically either in the eating disorder world or not. And I'm very excited about this panel. It's a little bit more free-flowing than John's panel, so just a heads up, but we have 6 really excellent clinicians here. And so I'm gonna start by having them introduce themselves very briefly and talk very briefly about the type of clinical work they are using or the program they're doing, because we have diversity here. And then I'm gonna ask them to talk about a major challenge that they see in their particular practice and type of practice with regards to behavior change and how they've found things that work and things that don't work. And then I'm really excited to open it up to the audience for us to have a discussion and the panelists to have a discussion. So that's just an overview of what this panel will look like. So just as a heads up, so I had said about 3 minutes. So I may cut you off to make sure that we have time for everything, but we'll go ahead and get started. So Campbell.
Hi, afternoon everyone. I'm Campbell Murdoch. I'm a GP or a family doctor in the west of England, near a city called Bath. I spent a couple of days doing that. I've had a special interest in metabolic health for just over a decade now. I'm also a clinical director for a number of practices that come together to cover a population of about 35,000. And there are many metabolic health solutions we're applying within that. I also work with a metabolic health retreat in Bath, which I think is the UK's first metabolic health retreat, called Coombe Grove, where people come for a 1-week stay with a 48-week support programme. And finally, I have a small company that I founded that really are looking at how do we spread information freely through the world. And with that, I've worked with everything from women's prisons and schools through to a way of funding that is wellbeing programmes within businesses.
Awesome, thank you.
I'm Mariela Glandt. I'm an endocrinologist, trained in the United States, but moved to Israel 12 years ago. And I was fortunate enough to be on my own, a little bit free under no formal organization. And so when I just saw after about 20 years of practice that the advice I'd been giving was not quite right, I was actually free to implement it. And this led to a diabetes clinic that's very specialized in giving ketogenic diet as treatment for reversal of diabetes. Our population is usually quite sick, and we've learned a lot from that. And we are now scaling this up, trying to bring this to more people and helping through OwnaHealth.
And I'm gonna bypass this section because you've already heard from me.
Okay. And my name is Barbara Kerstens. A lot of people say, like John earlier said, behavior change is hard or is impossible. And I know out of scientific and also practical experience that it is possible. I'm a co-CEO at Voeding Leeft. Emma told earlier about Voeding Leeft. We're developing lots of programs and we're here to talk about diabetes type 2. I'm fascinated in human behavior, starting with the behavior of myself and my 3 sons. And that's why I do a lot of experiences myself, like running or whatever, or sleeping. But last summer I did a 2-week course I was a cook, so I switched my role. I was a cook in a whole different area. That was my last experience. At Voeding Leeft, we have a multidisciplinary program, a holistic program, working with a doctor, a nurse, dietitian, and a coach. And the key thing, I think, is behavior change.
My name is Beth Zupec-Kania. I'm a registered dietitian nutritionist in the US, and I started working with ketogenic diet therapies in a pediatric hospital. And for 20 years, I helped implement keto nutrition for children and young adults with epilepsy and rare genetic metabolic disorders. And then I started training centers based on our great success, and I ended up leaving the hospital world, going into private practice so I could do training and also maintain a private consultant practice where I work with people with varying disorders, including eating disorders, multiple sclerosis, dementia, autism. Pretty much a lot of stragglers find me somehow. I don't even have to advertise. And I also designed a web-based calculator program to assist nutritionists and their patients in personalizing ketogenic therapy. And as we know from our previous panel, that is key to sustainability of a therapy like this, personalizing it to their culture and their abilities, and that's my story.
Thank you.
I'm Rob Cywes. I'm a metabolic health practitioner, but primarily I'm a fat guy. And you notice what I just said, I'm a fat guy. Dr. Atkins failed absolutely. He failed completely. Everybody that did Atkins' diet lost weight. But if you look at them 20 years later, and we see a lot of them, they've all regained it back. So the reason for that is because they were treating their obesity. They weren't changing who they are, and why they became fat in the first place. You are an alcoholic. You are a crackhead. You are a smoker. We are defined by what we do as a primary endorphin management response. In other words, what we do as a primary endorphin management response defines who we are as human beings. To go on a diet to lose weight, or to go on medication or lose weight, or change your diabetes by eating less carbohydrates is something we do, but it doesn't fundamentally in any way, shape, or form connect you with or answer the question of why did I become this person in the first place? Everybody in this audience knows what to do, but very few of us know how to help people to answer the why. So the other part that I look at in my own life as a fat guy, I've lost 106 pounds and I'm sitting here. Still got a ways to go. That was 23 years ago. If I look at my life and I say, okay, how old am I going to be when I die? And let's say I want to be 100 when I die. And I'm 30 years old now, you can tell. So that means that I've got to continue to do this for 70 years. That's an extremely long time. And if I am still a fat guy, by methodology, by mentality, by daily lifestyle, there is no way on God's earth I'm going to keep my weight off. So my vested interest in my practice, I've got a tremendous science foundation on understanding the inflammatory nature of sugar, insulin. Ben and I can go toe-to-toe on that. But he can help his cells by understanding science. I have to understand human biology, human function, and emotion management in order to help my patients, not to lose weight, but to sustain that weight until 10 minutes after they're dead. And that's what I do for a living.
So you can see we have a diversity of clinicians here, and I think that that's excellent, because I think that while we are all struggling with how to change behavior sustainably, that different types of practices are bringing in different types of patients, different cultures, different locations. And so I'm really excited to hear about, for you, what is that challenge in your practice that you see particularly related to behavior change, the main complaint you see, the main type of problem coming back where your patients are just not keeping with what they need to be doing, and how have you tried to address that, and what has worked for you?
It's been a long learning journey. So when my eyes first opened to this whole area of metabolic health, and initially I was just focused on nutrition, the science seems so simple, and the outcomes for some patients are so incredibly simple, and they just get it and off they go, and their health improves. But then over the past decade, learning what actually works and sustains that is what is key. I should just highlight, though, for some people it is just awareness, and we're looking at how do we get to the mass population. There is this base layer of awareness. I'm just going to share a little thing a patient wrote for me, so I just picked some recent patient information. This patient I had to call because he had a side effect from aflozin, one of the drugs that make you pee glucose. I'd never met him before, looked at his notes. Diabetes diagnosed 25 years ago, before that gout. He's had a heart attack, he's on antihypertensives, he's got leg swelling and inflammation due to one of his antihypertensives that cause leg swelling, causing all sorts of problems. Chapman is 72 years old. I phoned him up, hadn't met him, I'd looked at his notes and said, would you like to talk about possibly improving your situation? Has anyone ever spoke to you about this before? He said, no. I said, do you want to come in? This is what he wrote to me last week, 8 weeks later. Dear Dr. Campbell, the phone call that changed my health for the better. After that day you contacted me, by the way, I took your call on my mobile phone while working underneath my son's Classic Mini. You immediately drew my attention to the possibility that on working together, it may be possible to reduce the amount of drugs that I was on at that time. After my first consultation with yourself, I quickly realized that my diet was going to have to change. After 4 weeks on a new regime to improve my diet, I was able to reduce my daily insulin from 45 units in the morning and 50 units in the evening to 20 morning and evening. Now, after 8 weeks, I've reduced my weight from 110 kilos to 98 kilos, plus I no longer have to take the following tablets: amlodipine to lower my blood pressure, prednisolone to help with my arthritis, he's got rheumatoid arthritis, allopurinol dose is halved. I'm extremely grateful you're calling an assistant, making me feel 10 years younger. So his barrier was no one had told him, which is an absolute disgrace. It's an absolute disgrace. So this need for mass information. Then I found, so the approach I take, we decided to get rid of slides, so you have to visualize. The learning through failure I've put together a model that I work to in all the programs I'm involved with. There's an understand piece, which is knowledge, awareness and knowledge, and being confident with that. Having some form of assessment, whether that truly helps personalize it or there's some magic that happens in the brain when you get your finger pricked. And then a reason, what matters to you, the emotional reason why you care about this. Once you've got that, you can move on to the kind of achieve piece, as I call it. What's the plan? This is new information for a lot of people, so let's quickly build a plan. And then I've learned very specifically move on to really tangible actions. What is it exactly you're going to do? So in my NHS work, we use a 28-day rapid results plan, which patients seem to love, 10 things to do every day for 28 days. And then the review period. And then that all needs surrounded by a supportive connections and community, and that needs surrounded by an enabling environment. So what goes wrong is when people don't have those pieces, all of those pieces. And then also for people, there's a personalization. The patient with pre-diabetes, pristine diet, 55 years old, very easy life, plenty of money, very slight build, desperate to reduce her blood sugar level because it was causing her anxiety. For her, the secret was adding in weighted squats to build some muscle mass. So for me, it's combining that nutrition, movement, mindset, sleep with all those other factors, and you will get results on a massive scale.
And I think that's really fascinating because in the US, there are a lot of people who are really interested in these non-medication-based approaches. We have a lot of people, at least I'm seeing a lot of people interested in naturopathic and homeopathic approaches. And so I think that providing that, just that information, that education can be so helpful just as a starting point. It's just amazing the health literacy that lacks, that patients often lack. And it's making me think about very tangible goals. If you have to make things tangible and doable and small for patients, otherwise they just won't try it. Mariela, how about you?
I think you covered a lot of what we think in our practice, but I think there are a few things. First of all, I think that the diet is the easiest part to start with. But answering your question, just saying that I think when we do the diet first, then everything else kind of falls into place. So I kind of wait for all the other stuff that you talked about. But when you talk about what are the challenges, I think just in addition to what you were saying, part of the problem, at least in the diabetic population, is that patients are given the wrong medicine. So they don't, if they're given the wrong, not always, but sometimes when you're given medications that increase insulin levels, what happens is that the patient is blamed for being weak or not able to control anything and just incapable of any diet. But the truth is that if we lower the insulin, then we empower them immediately. So this is like a really easy thing to do. So I think that's one thing to consider as a challenge. But I think that our biggest challenge really is the addiction. But I'm going to the medicines because the medicines make the addiction harder. But this is something that I discovered later. At first, I focused on the diet and I thought that was it. But then when you follow patients over time, you do see that if you don't address the addiction to sugar, you will get in trouble. So this is where all the behavior that everybody here knows so much about comes into play. It is such a big part of our fight. So I would say these are the challenges that we face, but if we get at least the medical advice right, we can make it easier on the behavioral.
And what have you found has helped with addressing the addiction so that you can maintain that behavior change?
Well, funny enough, I think just mentioning addiction and bringing awareness, like you said, bringing awareness to the fact that this is like a drug, that alone has a huge wake-up moment. And people are like, oh, this, I am responding like an addict. And that has a lot of power, as the first step. So,
I think patients like to be able to explain why they're doing the things they're doing, yes. And that's an easy, understandable explanation. Allison.
So I find the biggest challenge with patients is why they're wanting to begin this process. And if it's because I'm grilling them and pushing them and it's my why, they're not ready. I find that if a patient has a new diagnosis or a big life change, that's the time to intervene. So I have patients where I've talked to them for months or sometimes years, but they're just not ready until something big happens. So it's about kind of taking advantage of those moments, but then also kind of building the case all along, not giving up on them, I think is extraordinarily helpful. Number two, what I've learned, and it was a big part of the evolution of my protocol, is teaching patients the skill set of self-compassion. That creates stress resiliency. As David alluded to, we need to be, encouraging these patients along the way and help them realize that they're gonna mess up. All of us are imperfect, and it's about having the ability to rebound and be resilient. That's when you're gonna have that long-term success. Nothing's ever one and done, and I tell patients that all the time. You're gonna go through this, you're gonna mess up, but you get back on board. So teaching the patients the skill set of self-compassion yields just resiliency. The other hurdle, as was mentioned earlier too, was the relationship dynamics of the household, right? Like oftentimes patients are in this situation because they've lived around friends and family members who are also in that situation. And as soon as they start making a change, now they're no longer a part of the group and they get criticized and pushed away. So it's really important to create a support group for that patient, especially if they're isolated in their home or friendship environments. And then next, because food is used as a coping mechanism, right? It's an addiction, and I think there's a spectrum of that. You have to teach patients kind of detours, alternatives to using food as the coping mechanism, but it has to also be a skill and teach them how to do that. And in our program, we actually teach the detour to become the immediate extrinsic reward mechanism. So it's not always data-driven. Sometimes it's more relational-driven, or, hey, I went on the walk instead of going for the chips in the cupboard, and I texted my friend who's supporting me, and she gave me the positive feedback that I need. So we have to create detours so when they do walk away, they're not resorting to food as that coping mechanism. And I think I'll pause there.
So I think you said two really important things that I think about. So in psychological treatment, we almost always include a relapse prevention component. And I think that is often missing if you have just a straight up medical care provision, right? It's the treatment and then off you go. And so I think that relapse prevention is really important. And related to that, the other thing that we've started talking about more in the world of psychology and behavior change is the family system or the couple system. And so there are people doing work on depression or eating disorders or even behavioral weight loss in terms of, instead of making it an individualized treatment, making it a family or a couples-based treatment. Because you have to go home, and if you were the primary food maker and now you're making something different and your partner and your kids are saying, no, I'm not gonna eat that, then that would be very challenging. So I think including the family system in that behavior change is really important to sustain it.
Thank you. We saw thousands of patients, not only the diabetes type 2 patients, and 9 of the 10 persons would like to change. They do make a change. And what these people have in common, they are humans, like you said. And it is very important to know that we are not a model, we are not a theory, we are human beings not wanting to make a change. But if we have the knowledge of what is not working, because a lot of people also know that the pizza or whatever is not good for them. But if you learn how to make a different loop, it is possible. So we have kind of 7 steps. Of all these 1,000 people, they have also in common that they have the same hurdles or barriers. So the first one we also already mentioned is, why are you doing what you're doing? So what are your patterns? Why are you always walking the same path or always eating the same? And this is a lot about numbing. It is addiction, but it's also numbing, not wanting to feel something. And if you are aware of your patterns, it is quite a hard step. But then you are willing to take another one. Then the next one is focus on, you already mentioned, where you want to go. So what is your purpose? Where do you want to go? So it's not only losing weight, but for example, Wim also told about playing with your grandchildren or something like that. So a more purpose goal than just losing weight. The third one is focus on what is working for you, because every step you take and every choice you make has an effect. So if you take, at the lunch, you take something what is not working for you, that has an effect later. So maybe today, but also later on in years. The fourth one I love, it is experience and dare to go out of your comfort zone. And I love it, but I know also, I do a lot of experiments, this is also a hard one. Because everybody knows this moment you wanted to jump in the swimming pool and you think, no, I'm not going. But that point, and just jumping in, that's also like the free fall. It's lovely. Then I love also the data. I love human better, but it is keep the score. So measure it, but also feel how it works in your body. And then train, of course, because you can't go, like running a marathon, which is not healthy, but everything you need to train, you have to make another neurological path in your head. And the last one, which is also, be compassionate about yourself. Stand up when you fall. Everybody falls, but just stand up, it's okay. And this is, like 7 steps, it is for human beings, but it's also for systems. I told you earlier that 12 years ago we started with Voeding Leeft. And we started it because we believed in a change in the world. And I think we can say the government needs to do, which I think they do need to do it, but we can say doctors don't know or the patients can't change, but we are the change. So please, we have a great audience here and lovely panelists. We are the change, so we can change the world. Let's keep on doing that.
I think that's so important. For those of you who have access to being lecturers or guest speakers in schools of medicine or colleges of medicine, I think that that's so important, and that is a way in, because I was having a conversation last night with somebody and they were saying that, one lecture can really change the way that students think about things and move forward and perceive things in kind of how they approach medicine and how they read the research. So I think that's a really important piece. If we can just get in to the med schools and just start to have these conversations, that will make a huge difference. And then that will help with behavior change down the line.
So I'll add one more behavior hurdle from what I've noticed working with thousands of patients over the years, and that is the ones that seem to do the best are those that have at least one support person, whether it be a parent, a spouse, a sibling, a child even. I have plenty of younger people helping their adult family members or even friends, but that seems to be really key. I have had some single people that have absolutely nobody. I'm thinking of a woman with a terrible eating disorder for many, many years, and we required her to bring a sponsor to a program to get going on a keto therapy this is for a research project. She had nobody, nobody. But we said, it's required. You have to find somebody. She brought an acquaintance with her to spend 3 nights at our center. So how sad is that? And then she ended up not doing very well either, although she did quite well over that weekend. She kind of fell off the radar of progress. And then secondly, one of my clients told me something that really resonated with the difficulty that people have when they change their lifestyle, especially for older adults. And their statement was, it was like changing my religion. Just everything about my lifestyle and about all of my relationships, I had to look through a different lens in order to be okay with that. And I think just talk therapy, just talking about that was like the best I could offer, and mostly me listening.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. So somebody on the previous panel mentioned that your relationships with your partners and your family changes, and that's really hard. And that's something that I've certainly heard people say, whether we're talking about mental health or eating disorders or obesity treatment, that sometimes changing that role in your relationships, people just, they just can't stick with it because it's just too hard from that interpersonal context. Robert.
Yeah, I think the biggest transformation that we've made is to connect our patients with what the real problem is. The problem is not nutrition, it's not your diet. Obesity is as much a nutrition problem as alcoholism is a hydration problem. Alcohol is not the problem. Alcohol doesn't cause alcoholism. It's an alcoholic's relationship with alcohol as a substance for emotion management that causes that relationship eventually gets broken, and that's what results in an alcoholic. As a surgeon, I use opioids every day. They are beneficial when I operate on patients. But if you're that opioid addict lying on the streets shooting up all the time, or like an anesthesiologist that in my operating room that died 2 weeks ago from fentanyl overdose, he knew everything about this. But that was his coping strategy. So we have to help our patients first and foremost to connect the dots that carbohydrates aren't the problem. It's our relationship with them, our use of carbohydrates, of snacking. A snack is always an emotional event, of binge eating disorder, of eating like a Rottweiler having breakfast. It's part of my problem. That relationship with eating and drinking for the endorphin value is what we have to look at. There's nothing better for me, there's nothing more emotionally emancipating for me than a tub of ice cream. And I'm willing to ignore the consequences for that high. So when you come to treating somebody in a sustainable way, when you remove carbohydrates, you've got to realize that they're going to leave a massive void in that person's life. Everybody's focused in this audience on replacing the removal of carbohydrates with healthy nutrition. And yes, that's an important component. I've got to return back to eating food that biologically my body benefits. But if you completely ignore the massive void that you leave in a person's head from an emotion management perspective, all it takes is one unexpected emotional event, and I'm straight back into the tub of ice cream again. So I have to focus on my vulnerability to addictive behavior and my patient's vulnerability to addictive behavior and find them equally effective sources of emotion management, preferably a diversity of sources of emotion management that more than adequately replace the role of carbohydrates or the role of the drug as a substance for emotion management. And if you look at, somebody mentioned this a little bit ago, a vulnerability to a drug addictive behavior is a vulnerability to instant gratification where you get an upfront massive tranquility, soothing obliteration of emotional tension, and you ignore the consequences on the back end. The polar opposite is what's called an effort-based emotion management system, where I pay a price up front for the benefit on the back end. So if I come home tonight and I'm all pissed off and angry and I eat a tub of ice cream, I get instant gratification, but my obesity flares up, whatever it may be, and I feel badly about myself. If I come home tonight and I've had a fight with someone and I'm all pissed off and angry, and I leash up my dog and we go for a walk, I have to put effort and time into that walk. But by the time I'm come back, as I'm walking, gradually over time, my emotions relax. Not like this, but like this. Secondly, because there's a time component, I can now look at, okay, I had a fight with someone today. What was the emotional fallout? How do I resolve that? When you use that tub of ice cream or that bottle of whiskey, you take that issue, you shove it in your subconscious. I call that psychological hoarding. I'm going to deal with that later. But we never ever do. So we become less effective as human beings. But if I take my dog for that walk, I'm emotionally relaxed, I'm problem solving, my subconscious is problem solving, and by the time I come back from that walk, I'm feeling pretty darn good about myself. And in little increments, an effort-based emotion management system builds self-confidence, self-esteem, and self-respect that is eroded by a relationship with an addictive substance. And that's what we teach our patients. That's the program we're in. It's a behavior modification program. And it applies equally well to any drug that these folks are in, because we're treating a vulnerability to addictive behavior, which is a comprehensive deficiency of effective emotion management strategies where the drug is the surrogate. A lot of our patients say, oh, when I was in college, I used to play sport. When I used to play the guitar. Well, I haven't played the guitar for 2 years. Why? Because I got ice cream. So that's a behavioral management program. And I'm a surgeon. I'm very pragmatic about it. Along the way, you use GLP-1 agonists, you use surgery, you use other advantages, tell people to lose weight. But nobody can change your behavior for you. I can hold your hand down that pathway, but I cannot do it for you. You've got to kill your own best friend and replace her with somebody better. That's sustainability. And of course, we're going to relapse. So you've got to have a program to analyze, to recognize and analyze when you do make mistakes. Don't beat yourself up. You can't pay it backwards. But I own the fact I made a mistake. What were the circumstances? And the next time I'm in the same situation, how do I do things differently? You develop a CAPA, a corrective action plan. That's our program.
And to jump on what you said about the going for the walk. So I think it's also about coaching patients about intentionality, and every move you make, be intentional with what you're doing, why you're doing it, what you're feeling in the midst of it. So when we talk about going on detours, we have what's called a purpose-driven detour loop. So instead of going for the ice cream, I'm going to take my dog for the walk. Now, as I get that leash and I go out the door with my dog, I'm thinking about my purpose behind this. And then as I'm going for the walk, I'm envisioning the long-term kind of goal and gain that I want to, achieve as a result of this. And then when I get home, I take a moment and say, wow, how do I feel now that I went for the walk? Maybe I look at my number of steps. If I'm data-driven, maybe I say to my husband, yeah, I went for the walk, if I'm more praise-driven. But every step of the process needs to be intentional and connected to the ultimate reward. And that's how that becomes the dopamine response and not the ice cream.
And I think it's so interesting because what everybody is saying basically is it becomes a person-centered approach. What is this person's, as we call it in psychology, case conceptualization? What is leading to the behaviors that are problematic and leading to the weight gain or the insulin issues or the cardiometabolic outcomes? And so figuring that out, and I think that many patients do love data. So if you can provide a picture, a graph, that can be very rewarding, and patients can really respond to that. So we have just over 20 minutes. So what I will do now is I will open it up to the audience to ask questions. And if there are no questions, I certainly have additional questions I can ask our panelists. But we would love to hear what your questions are about behavior change sustainability, particularly in the context of what our speakers have shared.
Hello.
Hi.
I come from the patient side, and I would just like to turn around the question and ask you, what advice would you give to a patient who comes to the endocrinologist, the neurologist, etc., with the ketogenic approach to treat their epilepsy or type 1 diabetes, and it kind of faces a wall? So that's advice for the patient, and then if you had that colleague in front of you, what advice would you, what would you tell them to open their mind?
Yeah,
thank you.
The thought, and I think to answer the second bit first, and I think for me, one of the wonderful things that's happened, certainly with this conference, but over the past couple of years, is the shift towards a focus on metabolic health. And I've certainly seen over the last 10 years that if you start with the intervention such as a ketogenic diet as the entire framing, that will attract some people and massively alienate others. But if you start with what really matters to me is controlling my epilepsy, and I'd like to do that through some lifestyle and behavioural changes, and I'd like your support with that, and then lead into options, then that seems to create less of an instant barrier in everyone, actually, not just clinicians. And the other thing I think is really important for clinicians, which goes back to the medical school training, and much of what I've been doing in my area, is raising awareness and almost not letting them off the hook. So as long as you land it right, you can raise this awareness with all clinicians and change the expectation. So they, in effect, can't hide, because this is just an acceptable way to go forward. As far as how to approach clinicians, they're all different, aren't they? So there's probably no one size fits all. But I would treat them as humans most of the time. And I guess it's that sales pitch, isn't it? If you want something from them, how are you gonna get them on board? What's their hooks? and how to make them feel, I guess, valued. And it's a shame you have to do it, but I guess that's human nature.
And I think not making the clinician you're speaking to feel like you're saying that they don't know what they're talking about, right? I think that that's, even with the best of intentions, sometimes providers can feel threatened. Yeah.
Can I add specifically for epilepsy, since that was my first expertise, there are now 13 controlled trials on ketogenic therapies effective for pediatric through adult epilepsy. So any patient going to a physician with epilepsy and asking for that as an alternative, particularly if they have failed at least 2 medications, which generally is the case by the time you're an adult, if that physician says no, that person has a case, because there's plenty of evidence. There are consensus guidelines that are published for both pediatrics and adults. So they have, in the US at least, a legal right to this therapy, and they need to take it to somebody that can fight for them.
Good.
Yeah, what I think is important to not push against, but flow with the person who is in front of you. And I would like to address this with an example. We were developing a program for multiple sclerosis, difficult word, a few years ago in 2015, and we called a lot of neurologists in the Netherlands, and there were several who said, "Oh, this is very interesting, but I'm not signing for the program. Good luck." And there was one who said, "I don't believe in this." And he called me 2 years later, and he said, "I had, I think, 6 patients from our program were in his practice." And he said, "I see a huge difference." So I love it when you don't push this person, but just let the time go with it, and have respect for the person where somebody is, and then change will happen, I think.
I've had some luck with cardiologists that were very against, and then they saw the results in patients and started softening up. So evidence, yeah.
And I don't know if this is the case for you, but in the US, if you have a provider who isn't going to do what you want them to do, you can go and find another provider. So I think that in some cases it's better to find a provider who's willing to at least be open to the approach you'd like to try, rather than trying to work with somebody who's really against it.
Yeah, I guess each country is quite different. Yeah. And then you have cases where you can fire your doctor, but you can also get fired.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's complicated. Yeah.
One other comment I would make is one word: telehealth. The world is one country because of telehealth when it comes to healthcare. And you don't need to be eyeball to eyeball with a doctor. I see about 40% of my patients are not in the US and are telehealth patients, maybe 35% of them, because we can have that discussion. So there are several doctors out there that you can access. Now, you've got to pay for it, so that's an economic decision. But it's well worth that. And then you can use your doctor from a pragmatic perspective to do certain blood work, to run certain tests. They then become a medical technician, whereas your advice and the guidance comes from somebody that is synergy with your way of doing things. Because ultimately we're changing you. We're not doing this for you, we're doing this with you.
Yeah. I just find it also a bit sad that this inequality comes in again. I've seen patients who perhaps they don't speak English, or they are not able to read through scientific papers, etc. And even harder if you're like parents advocating for children, then it gets really hard to get the support that you need from the doctor.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Graham Phillips from the UK. I'm a pharmacist, but for those who don't know me, I call myself the pharmacist that gave up drugs. I work with David Unwin, who you heard from earlier on. Our chair, David Jering, is with us. I'm a trustee of a UK charity called the Public Health Collaboration. Do have a look at the website, phcuk.org. There's tons of free resources and YouTube videos, and you can really help yourself. On the subject of food addiction, I'd like to flag up a resource And that resource was created by Dr. Jen Unwin, no relationship actually, Dave's wife, those who know her. This book here, Fork in the Road. And it's a handy guide to food addiction. And it's a really useful handy guide. You can get it, in all the usual places. And by buying a copy, or by your patients buying a copy, all the proceeds of that book go to the PHC. So it's an absolutely positive endeavour. And Jen and various other people, Biss Johnson, who I'm sure many people know, are working, because officially there's no such thing as food addiction, right? There's sex addiction, drug addiction, every other form of addiction, but in the international classification of diseases, food addiction doesn't exist. I wonder why that might be. I'll leave you to ponder on that, but there are a group of us who are absolutely campaigning to see that entered into that food addiction diary and classification. Probably doesn't suit the business model of Big Food. Maybe that's the answer. So please do join in that crusade as well. Thank you.
Thank you. And tomorrow and Wednesday, we'll be spending much more time discussing food addiction. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Kasia Hongler. I'm a dentist, psychologist, and a health and resilience coach. So I thank you very much, the whole panel, for touching on very many very important points related to food addiction. I have a question a little bit beyond what we spoke about, because we spoke mostly about adult population coming to seek health advice. However, the children of today are potentially our patients of tomorrow, which we don't want to have. So what are your suggestions? What could we do for our children growing up in a climate of kind of promoted ultra-processed food everywhere, and also with the growing inability to cope with emotional setbacks? This is something which I've been thinking about more and more, and I'm frustrated when thinking about it, so I hope you could solve and help me a little bit. Thank you.
Yeah, go ahead. Solve your problem.
I've found an ingenious way to help with this, just one solution, and there's obviously many, many needed. But schools obviously are key with this. But I've found if you go in to deliver a staff wellbeing program around metabolic health for the staff, they then quickly understand and see the benefits for themselves, and then there are these consequences of that for the children. So just as an example, one school I went into for a staff wellbeing program saw one of the teaching assistants about 2 months later who had transformed her life from a 1-hour talk, and she now said, I also run the breakfast club, and instead of breakfast cereals, all the children are mixing their own eggs. So it's a sideways way in, but that's, I think, just one solution is through teacher training at schools.
Yeah, I think the biggest problem with kids and adolescents is the support group, which you mentioned, right? Because oftentimes also the families are not supportive, maybe even if the child or the adolescent would understand for themselves, yeah, it makes sense, I should leave it. But they are addicted, they need the support, and in the family like this, junk food is everywhere. I think also the advertisement all over the place in shops, right? I mean, schools are very important, also like kindergartens, wherever you go, nurseries even, but it's very difficult to get there. I mean, maybe we should really go like step by step and be happy if you could change only one kindergarten and then go to another one. Thank you.
And if I may comment as a pediatrician and an adult internist, so I have newborns until my oldest patient I think is 95 currently, and it really takes me to counsel the parent to make that impact on the child. It is very age dependent at which point that child, now adolescent or early college age, it does start to shift where I can now directly communicate with that adolescent or late teen patient. They start to take some autonomy, and that's the approach I have in counseling them, is like, you don't have your parent with you 24/7. This is now where you make those connections. But generally speaking, we have to change the parent, the environment within the home. And I always say to parents, you can't force your child to eat the salmon and broccoli. Where your control is removing the bad stuff from the home. So let's start there. We can't control what's happening at school, so let's start in the home environment. But as I've said before, nothing's one and done. It takes repetition, reminders, but it also takes, I have to make sure I don't make that parent feel less of a parent because they're in that situation. So there's just such a gentle dichotomy that has to take place where I'm empowering the parent, not diminishing their parenting skills, but educating them in the process.
Yeah, I see the point, but my point is more on the preventive way, right? Because you already mentioned, like, it would happen what you would do, what you just suggested. You would do it only if a child comes or an adolescent approaches you seeking your help. I would like to start with the process before they need to come to us and ask us for help. Because, I mean, the environment is getting worse and worse. And also with the new medications, right? It's sold as, I just recently heard on TV, Swiss TV showing in Germany, they promote GLP-1 agonists for teenagers for weight loss. Right. So that's why, just maybe a food for thought.
I think if you really want to expand this, the greatest threat to our society is parenting.
Right, yes.
Yes. We don't teach our parents how to parent. We teach them how to do so much, but we don't teach them how to parent. And ultimately, a child's emotion management system is established within the first 2 to 5 years of its life. And as parents, we get raised a certain way, we become that person, and the single best thing we can do is to raise our own kids the same way. So this crosses generations behaviorally, not genetically. And, you know, my parents might have been smokers, I'm the fat guy, the next group are going to be vapors or using the next best drug, but it's the vulnerability to addictive behavior. So, and there's a de-emphasis on effort-based parenting skills, where you teach the child to play before they get involved in a sports team. You teach them how to enjoy stories before you teach them how to read. I've got a 3-year-old, he's already being taught how to read. Yes. We had to help him to fall in love with stories before he was forced to read. So, you know, those are the challenges. So if you want to really broaden it out, that's where the focus is. And on a panel like this, I think that is quintessential. We're reversing that in our addicts. But to prevent it, you want to start that in utero. That mother is feeling stressed and she eats the ice cream. That's imprinting that child on carbohydrates and a sugar rush as a form of coping. If that mother goes for a walk or listens to music and it calms her down, that's already imprinted in utero. This starts from conception.
You're right, I see it also like this. That's why I'm so frustrated, because it seems that we will have more and more patients.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think universal prevention in the US would be, you know, amazing, but also challenging, because a lot of it is food choice related, and our government has a lot of regulations about what food is in the schools and what food accounts for food stamps, what can you buy with food stamps, and it's not always aligned with what we're talking about today.
Hello, I'm a physician from Poland, and I came here with my brother, who is also a physician, so we are rodzeni brothers. And the good news is that in Poland, low-carb lifestyle is getting more popular and popular. That's why we organize a huge conference every year, and it's getting bigger and bigger. This year was 3,000 people together, 1,500 live, and the same quantity of online. So it's a really good experience for us, and we treat our patients with low carb and ketogenic diet since a few years, and it's incredible how to from the moment that you start treating patients with low carb diet and ketogenic diet, and you start and you reverse first your diabetes in your first patients, it's never gonna be the same practice, never. And that's why when we started do it's impossible to work another way. And my question is, because we realized together that almost every patient, our patient with insulin resistance or type 2 diabetes, they need to see psychologist at some time. Some of them, most of them, at the beginning of the process, most of them, and almost all of them maybe later. And my question is, because we've got our French psychologists, we call them and we arrange some appointments, because when we just leave it for the patient's decision, it's very difficult, because how to find a good psychologist who know low carb lifestyle. It's very difficult, and it especially on the internet when they write how to treat, a ketogenic diet or low carb with low carb lifestyle, my diabetes or anxiety or depression, they will be more confused. So, what is your system or algorithm when it comes to organizing some appointments for patients? Is it like the patient's decision or you helping them?
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, we are a team of 3 doctors, 3 nutritionists, 2 coaches, and a psychotherapist. And we used to have a nurse, but she just retired. And I have found that the psychotherapist is actually super important in this process. But I have to say, not for everybody. Like you said earlier, sometimes just people having the knowledge is enough to do the change. But then once you start to see that patients are running up against problems and obstacles, then you can easily see, I actually think that maybe coming to this problem from a different approach might really help you. And this is why this person is part of our medical team, to give the feeling that there's so much stigma against psychotherapists, unfortunately. Yeah. But I mean, I think this is a really important part of the treatment. And it's not a surprise, right? Because if you get diabetic for many reasons, there's something here that you're sabotaging. Most people know that they're doing damage to themselves and they do it anyway. So there is here something that needs to be worked on at a deeper level for sure. And it's just a matter of destigmatizing it, I think. And now there are psychotherapy. Now there are trainings for dealing with this. I mean, the psychotherapist that works in my office, she was actually trained with Bitten Johnson and Dr. Georgia Eid. So I know that now the people are being trained to take care of mental illness, also with the combination with the low carb. So this is the kind of therapist you need to find.
Thank you.
Barbara.
Yeah, I also believe in a multidisciplinary team. And I've got good news for you, because we are training 12 countries in the European Union, and Poland is one of them. So maybe we can connect the Polish people with you.
Yeah, it would be great. I think we should connect.
I think, we employ a psych nurse practitioner and a clinical psychologist. I employ them. But I think this is someone like John, the leadership that he displays in this community can raise an awareness that we need that referral base internationally. Again, telehealth is not a bad way to go, but if we can raise an awareness that it benefits insurance companies, both on the life and the health side, to have these folks on staff, because they don't get paid well directly, so the income is an issue. But if the value is there and we can have that as a referral source through insurance, that may be a very equitable way to go. And it doesn't have to be in Poland. By the way, I spoke at these guys' conference last year. They've done such an incredibly phenomenal job in Poland. It is absolutely superb. And I think Dave Unwin spoke there this year. Yeah. They've done miracles in Poland where nobody knows. But I strongly endorse what you guys are doing. But I think a global network of practitioners is required in order to solve that kind of problem.
Campbell.
Just fitting with what sounds like the fantastic conference you had, and I guess everyone here and watching online, there's the retreats we run, one part of it is people coming together. And not only is improving metabolic health going to improve, often quite rapidly, people's kind of physical health, but they're joining something. And that positive experience, which I think is really key. Some of you will know somebody called Brandon Block, who had a misspent youth in the 80s and 90s from Ministry of Sound. Obviously huge following, and he came on the retreat and he said what changed him from his sugar addictions was joining something that he was passionate about and meeting passionate people. So I think the importance of that actually can't be underestimated, and clearly you've got an art form of how you create that. So I think programs, whether it's in workplaces, whether it's in schools, whether it's in communities, whether it's in clinical settings, harnessing that seems to be incredibly powerful.
Yeah, and one sentence. I think it's very important to say to doctors who starting practicing low carb lifestyle that they don't have to be a psychologist to their patients, because it's very hard to be a doctor, to be a dietitian, and to be a psychologist to your patients. You need to have help from the other professionals, and this is what we did at the beginning. Okay, it was wrong, but we were so excited, about this whole new thing that we tried to be, psychiatrists, like psychologists and dietitians, and it's very dangerous, and don't do it. Because it's like very dangerous, because you have to have too many problems, your patient's problems, and you don't have mechanisms to cope with. Psychologists, you have loads of mechanisms to cope with very stressful and life with the patients with the psychological thing. So.
Well, thank you. So you just took us to the end of our time, so thank you so much. I want to thank the panelists. I think the takeaways are individualized support and what's the sort of behavior. Why is it a coping skill? What is its function? So thank you so much, and I think that we're on lunch.
So just before you go, so thank you, Rods and Brothers. You've made me. I was really happy about our conference, and now I think it's really puny and really small. So yeah, well done. So we have lunch now until 2:15, right? It's a little shortened, so be quick or fast. You can choose. And please be back on time. When you go up the stairs towards the reception area, on the right-hand side, there'll be a table where you can sign for your CGM, right? We will have enough, but I'm a little worried because, of course, we're going to offer this for the next 3 days, right? Because people are going to arrive tomorrow and Wednesday that aren't possibly here today. So if you do have one, or you've used one, or you kind of know what the results would be, or you're in a ketogenic diet, then maybe you don't need one. So try and make sure you leave CGMs for those who can really learn and experience it. So thank you very much. Please be back at 2:15. Metabolic psychiatry this afternoon. It's going to be mind-blowing. Thank you.